And for those of you who are joining online, thank you as well. Again, for all of you, this is going to be hopefully a lot more fun and interesting for you. If you bring your questions and make it as interactive as possible, we're happy to try to give you what you want and are going to find most interesting. So before I allow my colleague Spencer here to introduce himself, I want to say just a little bit about the League. And I've got a 5-year-old boy who, when he hears League, he thinks of League of Justice and crime fighting and superheroes and things on that line. It's not quite that exciting, but I still think pretty fun and interesting work that we get to do. So I'd just like to tell just a little bit about what the League does. And in some ways, you can think of it as kind of a superstore for cities. Anything that our cities need, when they're going shopping for something, we do our best to provide it. So if cities have legal questions, our lawyers work to provide the answers. If the cities want to know how another city is doing something, we'll do research and help them try to provide that information as well. If they want to do training, any workshops, things like youth councils, we're here to try to help provide whatever it is that they might be looking for and do our best to put them in the best position to help the citizens of the city. So that's kind of a snapshot of what we do, which means there's a lot of variety to it. And certainly it's a lot of fun along the way. So in a bit, I'm going to talk some more about what cities are and what we do. But first, I'd like to let Spencer introduce himself. And he gets to come at this from 2 different perspectives. And so let's hear from Spencer.
Good morning. I'm shorter than he is, see, so I'm going to move the mic a little. I am Spencer Duncan, so I'm what they call the Government Affairs Director for the League of Municipalities, which essentially means I spend my day working with all the state legislators and our congressional representatives in Congress to make sure, hopefully, that they pass laws that are good for cities, or if they're trying to do something that we think is bad for cities, I have to convince them to not do that, right? So that is how most of my day is spent. But I also work with all the cities across the state to help them develop their own policies. So sometimes they have a question about, we want to do this, how do we get it done in our own city? And I go in and try to help them figure out how to pass that law in their own city to make it happen. Or if they want to go to the state legislature and have an idea, I will help them get their idea to the state legislature. So I've been at the League for 3 years. Before I got there, this will actually be my 20th year where I'm a lobbyist, a government affairs person over at the state legislature. So I've been doing it for a while. I represented a lot of other random groups. I am also, in case you ever need any help, I'm a licensed private detective in Kansas and have been for about 18 years. So, you know, I skulk in the shadows every once in a while. If you ever need something, give me a call. But the other thing I am on the city council in Topeka. 8 years ago, first time I'd ever gotten into politics. I grew up in Topeka, and in fact, the district I represent in Topeka is where I grew up, so I know it quite well. And I was like just any other citizen. I said, hey, I bet I can do as good a job as those folks, right? I know the city of Topeka. Why can't I be a part of government and see what I can do? So I actually ran, the first time I ever ran for office, I ran for mayor. I'd never run before. I ran against some people who people knew. I lost, but I only lost by 1.5%. So I don't know if it's better to lose a close race, which is heartbreaking, or just get beat really bad because you're like, oh, I lost really bad, right? I'm not sure. I don't have a good answer for that. But then 2 years later, I ran for city council, and I won. But I only won by 13 votes. So don't say votes don't matter, because your vote does count, because 13 is a very slim margin. It's the second smallest margin of victory in the history of Topeka. So it was very close. In fact, we had to wait like a whole 2 weeks before we knew all the votes were counted. And first I was winning, then I was losing, then I won again. It was a little crazy. And then this last time I just got reelected, but it wasn't as close of a race. I won by about 1,000 votes. So that was a much easier night. I didn't have to wait 10 days. But I really do serve on my city council because I'm just a guy who grew up in Topeka who wants to help my city. I don't have grand aspirations to go above city council. I don't want to be famous or do any of that stuff. I literally just want to work every day to make sure that the people I grew up with in my own community and the city that I love works the way it's supposed to, right? And so that's why I serve on the city council in Topeka. So yeah, as Nathan said, I kind of wear 2 hats in this, as a city council person and then someone who's fighting every day for all the cities across the state of Kansas, including Wichita.
Thank you very much, Spencer. So I'm going to kind of put our students that are here on the spot for just a bit.
I promised them that wouldn't happen.
Oh, well, I can pivot pretty easily, but if you guys hear the word government, what comes to mind? And if one of the teachers want to help get things started, that's fine too. But what do you think of? What's the first thing that comes to mind? guys were talking so much at the beginning. Come on.
Doesn't have to be good.
Yeah. Important people. That's a very noble start. I like to hear that. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Someone who has power. Fantastic. Somebody else had a hand up? Yeah? Say it again. That special? Fantastic. I love the positive side of things. You're doing far better than most of the adults that we end up coming to. Yeah. Specific rules and regulations relating to the people? Absolutely. You guys are doing great job. Commend all the teachers as well. So if I were to pose this question to a lot of adults, you're going to get things like taxes, voting, military, healthcare, and these are ideas, particularly right now. We're just a month away from a presidential election. So particularly every 4 years when that happens, we end up focusing a lot on the federal issues, kind of the biggest things that are happening in Washington, D.C. And that's reasonable. We're a very powerful country. Power was one of the things that were mentioned. So this comes up a lot. But the point that Spencer was making, every day when each of you woke up, whether you thought about it or not, you were leaning on local government. The fact that you're here, local government had a role. If you washed your face or took a shower this morning, when you turned on the water, local government's at play to make sure that water comes in and that you could safely drink it, that it goes down the drain and goes away and gets taken care of. When you get on the roads, everything that you do to get in between, those are things that government provides. And most of those end up being city services. And so part of the reason why both Spencer and I get jazzed about this work is that they may seem like really little things, but when you have a group of people that are together, this legal idea of what a city is, it has some power elements, it has some people elements, but when it comes together and is working well, you turn that into community and can accomplish so much along the way. And that's part of what we at the League are trying to work together to help make happen. It's easy, and I think at least when I was in your position many, many years ago, I found some of this stuff to be really interesting, but it's also easy to think, so what? What I would like to encourage you to hold on to today and in the years ahead, between particularly now and when you turn 18 and are able to vote and able to have a part in all of this, is that you think about cities as something that you can engage in to help make community possible. One of your teachers mentioned that maybe someday you'll be sitting up here representing your city. You getting to do the work that helps make community possible. But there are so many volunteer opportunities. When you look at surveys for what Gen Z is looking for in jobs, having purpose, working on something that actually matters is usually part of it. And cities, and I was talking to Sarah, who's on Mayor Wu's staff just a little while ago, and when you want to do work that actually matters, that can make a real difference in your community, looking to the city as a place to make your job, or as a place to volunteer, whether it's serving in an elected office or working on a committee, you can do so much to work side by side with your neighbors to make something actual meaningful happen. So that's just one point that I want to bring up. I don't know if you have anything you want to add on that.
Well, I'll just add this. Here's why you need to care about local government, all right? So I'll give you an example. I know all of our congressional folks. If I saw them right here, they'd be like, hey, how you doing, Spencer? But if I needed something and I send them an email, it goes through like 6 different people and maybe I'll get to them, right? And when they're trying to pass a law in Washington, even if they agree on something, it can take them years to actually get it passed, right? We don't have a lot of access to the federal government, right? If you get to the state legislature, it gets a little easier, but they have committees and it has to go through all the different chambers and they have to have all these hearings. And if you're in Wichita, you're 2 hours away from the state capitol. But here's the thing about your local government. You can come here every meeting and you can stand at this exact podium that I'm standing at right now, and you can talk directly to these folks and say, hey, I think you're doing a really good job, or hey, I really need you to take a look at this and fix it. And they're going to listen to you, and you can probably actually fix some of those problems really quick if you engage with your local government. And so the importance to me and why I like local government is it's the quickest way, and quick is subjective. Sometimes quick in government is still kind of slow, okay? I'll admit it. But it's the quickest way if you have a real problem that you're going to probably get it solved is by using the people you get to know on local government. And you have a better chance of actually getting to know who your council person is and being able to say hi to them and being on a first name basis and them listening to you. So you should care about all levels of government, but you should really be engaged with your local government. And sometimes, especially during election times, lots of people vote for the federal elections, and that's important, but less than half of those people, in fact, it's about 20% of those same people actually vote in local elections, even though the people you vote for in local office impact your life way more than all those other people do. So keep that in mind as you think about the importance of local government.
Well said, thank you. So I'd like to talk just a little bit about cities specifically. I think you may have this handout that we put together, and it references the governing body handbook. And those words may not mean anything to you right now, but that is something, it relates to a publication that we put together every 2 years and provide for all the cities in Kansas that are part of our membership. So there are 625 cities in Kansas. Nearly all of them are part of our membership. And it probably doesn't surprise you, because you're in the very biggest city, that there's a lot of variety in what those cities look like. If you do a short drive across, you don't have to get very far, just staying in Sedgwick County to figure out that it's a lot different from one city to the next. And part of what we work through is trying to serve each of them, as different as they may look. And so we do try to provide some of just the very basic principles about what a city is trying to accomplish and their objectives. As part of that variety in the different approach, you're going to have different roles that each of the city, even from the mayor's standpoint, you'll hear this idea within city ranks about a strong mayor system versus all sorts of other systems. And part of the reason for that, again, is this great variety in those 600 plus cities. In the 1960s, Kansans came together and changed the Constitution. So this core document that shapes all of the work that we get to do, they gave cities something that we call a constitutional home rule. And if you just chewed on that idea of home rule, I think you might come up with what that actually is. And it just means that cities have great capacity, great power to be able to pass the laws and the rules within their own cities. And so as part of that, you have cities that give different amounts of power to their mayor for what they're going to provide for their leadership. And so if cities decide, oh, we want to give a lot more to our mayor, then you have this idea of a strong mayor system. But that's not actually something, there's no law in the books that says this is a strong mayor. It has to do with how many different things a mayor is allowed to do within their capacity as a mayor. I was talking with our general counsel, one of our lawyers, yesterday, and he gave an example in a small city that they had a longtime mayor who did everything. He was involved at every step, every time that a new business opened, everything along the way, he was there. And when he retired, the city ended up having to hire a city administrator, kind of a day-to-day manager who oversaw the city operations, because they discovered, oh, this mayor had just been doing all of these things and they had no idea. And so that's part of the variety that you may see from one city to the next in what they're trying to accomplish. So again, just a lot of variety from one city to the next. Anything to add?
Not on that.
Yeah.
No. What Topeka is in terms of our government? Yep. So, yeah, I get calls a lot, especially when newspapers are writing articles about, hey, is this the same? Why isn't the same? How does this work in every city? And my answer is, it doesn't work the same in every city. We have 625 cities, and they all have slightly, not all, but there's only certain types of form of governments. So in Topeka, we have what we call a city manager form of government. So we actually are one of the largest city councils in the state. We have 10, which gets a little crazy, 9 council members and 1 mayor. And so our mayor has input and a lot of insight, but our city manager runs the day-to-day operations of our city. But our mayor is also the only person elected by everybody, right? And so the mayor has a very important role to play. Even though our city manager runs the day-to-day operations, it's our mayor's job to go to our city manager and say, hey, I'm talking to all the people in our city, and this is what's important to them, and we need to make it a priority. Our mayor has the power, I don't as a councilman, to put anything they want on our agenda. So if the mayor thinks it's important and they want to...
Kansas. That role that you're going to have in just a few short years makes a difference for my little boy. And it's going to make a difference for the next little kid that comes along. And you have opportunities. There is always a need for more people to lead. And if you take on that idea right now, the effect that you can be having, not just now, but for all the years to come, makes such a difference, and it will make a big difference for what Kansas is going to be. And that's what we want to see, and that's part of why we're here today. So, yeah. So Corey, if you want to open things up to questions.
Yeah, I want to thank our Mayor's Youth Council for submitting some wonderful questions for us to ask both of you guys. First question, what do you see as the biggest challenges facing municipalities in Kansas over the next few years?
To somewhat that's different, but I can tell you the big issues that are keeping folks up at night right now across the city, and part of that's housing. We do not have enough houses in this state. And it doesn't matter what your income is or what level you're at, but especially at affordable housing level, there's not a single city in this whole state that has enough houses for people. And we've got to do better on the housing part of it. And I think in some communities, public safety is always a concern. Crime actually in Kansas has gone down, believe it or not. I know it doesn't feel like that some days or what you hear, but it actually has, and that's something that people continue to focus on. So those are the two big ones that we talk about or people ask us about all the time. And then Nathan mentioned earlier, taxes. That gets kind of into the weeds, and taxes are a little nuts, and people complain about it a lot, and rightfully so to some degree, but taxes is always an issue. But honestly, if you talk about the number one thing, it's housing. And then the second one that we talk about right now at the legislature is healthcare. How can we make sure that everybody has healthcare? So those are the really, housing and healthcare probably 1 and 2, and then public safety 3 if you talk to the cities as a whole.
On the housing point, so you guys talked about the 6 districts, and you look at population of the city of Wichita. I had one visit up in northwest Kansas, and it was a city of just 1,000. So again, just a tiny little percentage of what Wichita is. And same point that Spencer just made. Just trying to get enough houses because they have one business that wants to grow. And it has this extended effect of where are we going to put people if they're going to work? And that kind of dovetails with homelessness. And it all ends up fitting together that if we don't have enough housing, even for, again, if you have high-paid executives that are going to lead this business, where they live ends up having an effect on everybody else. And so all those pieces fit together and continues to be an issue all across the state.
All right, next question. How can municipalities improve citizen engagement and participation in local government?
One of the pieces that I mentioned earlier was this ambassador role. And this idea of being out in the community makes an incredible difference. One piece that is often overlooked, cities kind of develop their rhythms and their norms. And it is easy for people to slip into those same roles that they may always have. You've got the meetings that are going to take place. People are going to read about it and follow what's going on for the official city business. But when our elected officials have relationships with people at all walks of life, that provides more opportunities for people to be aware of what's going on. I mentioned earlier that, typically with government, you're kind of thinking about things that relate to the president, federal government, far away. But when more people are aware of what's actually happening at the local level, it gets more people excited and helps on that engagement front. You want to talk about some of the things that you do with Topeka?
Well, first of all, if anybody runs for office and says they're for the people and they listen to the people, but they never return your phone calls, never respond to your emails, and you never see them out and about, don't believe them, because they really don't know what's going on, right? They just like to say that because it sounds good in a commercial and they wanted your vote. I can't ever tell any other elected official how they should do things. All I can tell you is how Spencer thinks things should be done and how I do things, right? So, and I sort of feel bad, but sometimes not. We have emails that will come into our whole council sometimes that will say, the only person who responded to me was Spencer, right? I respond to everybody. And sometimes it's not a huge response, but it's an acknowledgement that I heard you, and I agree or disagree, right? I call everybody back. Even when I will get voice messages sometimes from people who are yelling on the voice machine, rah! And my wife will say, you're not going to call them back, are you? And I'm like, oh, I'm calling them back. And usually after it's over, we may not agree, but we tend to have a very good conversation where I've gotten some new information, they've gotten some new information, and we still may disagree on the issue, but we know that moving forward, we can still talk about it and maybe fix it. I'm also the only elected official. Sounds like I'm bragging, I'm not. But this is how I think people should do things. Who twice a month, I go to this place called Fairlawn Plaza in Topeka, and I just sit there for a couple hours, and people can just come talk to me. And they do, right? So that's the easy way that I think we as elected officials have a responsibility to engage people, right? It's our job to reach out to the public and say, how can I help you? What are we doing? Let's have the conversation. Now, I say all that with this, though. It's also your responsibility to be engaged. You have to pay attention to what's going on. I can only go halfway. You have to meet me the other halfway. So whenever citizens get mad about something because they haven't been paying attention, and then it happens, even though we've had lots of meetings and it's been in social media and they act like they've never heard of it, I understand that, but it's because you weren't paying attention also, right? And so what I say is I will do my part, and I will tell every elected official that they have got to do their part. But there is a citizen responsibility, like I said to you folks. Just because you're kids, it doesn't matter if you're upset about something. Send us those emails. Show up at those meetings. Tell us we're doing it right or wrong, right? You have to do a little bit of that. So it's a double-edged sword. We all have a role to play and a responsibility to do it. But I think that's the best way is there is a responsibility to have you force us to engage sometimes. Not just wait for us to come to you, because that's not always going to happen. Let's be honest.
You mentioned some of the issues facing cities and towns across Kansas. So this question is, what role could youth play, if any, in addressing some of those issues?
I mean, this kind of harkens back to Spencer's comments. You are immensely capable individuals and have a role both today and in the years to come. And so your observations, even if it comes down to just talking to your parents, your voice matters. Our elected officials represent you. Just because you're not voting yet doesn't change the reality that our local officials represent you just as much as the people who vote for them. On the values part that we're trying to encourage each of our city officials, again, over 600 cities across the state. The way that Spencer engages in Topeka, again, a very large city, may look different from that city of 1,000 that I visited in Northwest Kansas. But this idea, represent all constituents, not just friends or neighbors, ensure that decisions are made for the greater community, avoiding personal bias or favoritism. So when you speak, there may be instances where it doesn't come through as loudly or clearly, but your voice matters because it's part of the community. And so practicing even now as part of a youth council makes a difference in making sure that your voice is heard and that cities or all levels of government are responding and making sure that we're representing everybody and doing so well.
As I've stood here, the light bulb just went on, right? And I realize we're talking about our organization represents all the cities of Kansas, and I think most of the cities and its size should have some sort of youth input. And you know what just occurred to me? We at the league don't have any youth input. We don't have a youth council. We don't put together a group of youth every once in a while so that when we talk to our cities across the state, we can say, you know what I'm hearing from students all across the state of Kansas? So I'm gonna tell you my takeaway already from today, and what you've already shown me is that we probably need to go back and have a conversation at our organization about how we're including your voices so that for those cities who aren't listening as much, we can be that conduit to say, here's what we're hearing, and if it applies to most of the youth across the state, probably applies to your city too. So there's my takeaway, and I'm going to take that back with me after today.
Okay, here's another question. Are there any recent legislative changes that municipalities should be aware of?
You take the lead on this one.
That's a loaded question. So I'll give you an example. So in the last 2 years, the legislature looked at over 1,300 bills that were filed by legislators. They've passed over 300 different bills. And some of those were for things that don't impact municipalities at all and were very small or minor traffic laws. Others were really big things, like they completely redid how people pay income taxes. And that was a whole big controversial brouhaha, right? So they pass a lot of laws, and some of them are really big and some of them are really small, and we have to monitor every single one of those. So yeah, there were some things that obviously impact cities every day. Most of them are very clerical, things that, you know, to the average citizen may not be a big deal. To the cities, they're a headache. Oh, we have to do this now. Oh, that's a pain, right? What we try to do when we look at those changes, though, we really do try to remind state legislators that every city is different. Cities don't look alike. And when Nathan talked about that idea of constitutional home rule, one reason that the voters of Kansas wanted constitutional home rule, as opposed to the legislature dictating how everything should be, was they wanted Wichita to look different than Lawrence, to look different than Topeka, to look different than Dodge City or Hutchinson, right? It's okay, because then you can decide as a Kansan, yeah, I like Kansas as a whole, and there's some things like, but I want to go live in this city because they're a little bit different than that city, and I kind of like how they're doing things over there, or there's something unique to that city that I want to be a part of. So the biggest thing we remind legislators is when they make those laws, don't ruin that for Kansas. Let cities have and hold on to their individuality and make those decisions, because again, when we make those decisions, when they make those decisions up here, they're going to do it by talking to you, and they're going to know what you're interested in locally. State legislators, and you have representation from Wichita, and they're great, but as a whole, they don't know what's always good for Wichita. And so that's really the big one for us, is any changes they make, we want to make sure preserve the identity of our cities, because we don't want every city to look alike. That's no fun. Nobody wants to live in that state, right? We like a little creativity and individuality. So that's kind of how we've focused on, is if the laws ruin that for Kansas. So far, they haven't, but they've tried a few times. But that's why I'm here, to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I've often told people that we follow every subject basically outside of education. And even that, to a certain extent, we end up doing. But the cities are the conduit. They're the central core for so many different factors. I spent yesterday at a conference that deals with water all day long. And the idea as it relates to Kansas is an incredible producer for agriculture. So that piece on how we use water for agriculture, how we use water within cities, the drinking water, what we do with the wastewater, all of these pieces end up fitting together, because without water, we don't get to live. So the way that the state uses its resources, that still comes down to, so 84% of all Kansans live within cities. And again, those cities look very different from one to the next. But all of the laws that end up getting passed, they change how things work within those cities. And so, we're tracking it all throughout the year. We're listening to our cities and trying to provide that information to the legislators. And then as soon as everything is done, we unpack all the information, bring it to our cities, and help them put it into effect.
I will add to that, we've talked a lot about you going to your local governments, which is important, but don't forget about your school boards. They really matter to what you're doing every day, a lot of them, right? So don't forget, they have the same process. They're elected, they have meetings, they have podiums. You know, go up and stand up there and say what you need to say sometimes. It's good. Even if we don't always like what you're saying, it's good for us to hear, all right? It's okay. We can take it, and it's good for us to hear differing thoughts and opinions. And believe it or not, I don't think we're supposed to say this, but I will. Sometimes you're right and we're wrong, and we'll change our mind. Just shh, don't let that get out there too much.
All right, Nathan, you mentioned water. More than 50% of Kansas is in a drought, and farmers worry about this for obvious reasons. Bigger cities have undertaken watering limitation programs. Is the league involved in helping cities figure out how to manage this problem?
Yeah, I had a conversation with a state official yesterday. We had, Spencer mentioned having citizens coming in talking to the cities. In the same way, our cities come and speak to us. Spencer and I were at meetings all across the state, and water continued to come up on a regular basis. And so both from a usage standpoint, from a disposal standpoint, from a treatment standpoint, we heard just two easy examples. We have wastewater operators. So anytime you flush the toilet, wastewater goes away. You need very skilled individuals to be able to take that water and make sure it gets cleaned in a way that is good for Kansas, not just today and keeping people healthy so we don't get sick in the streets, but for all the generations to come, making sure that we're taking care of it well. We had requests because we have not enough people that know how to take care of the water that we have. And so the request from our cities comes back to how do we train individuals and how do we put them in a position to make sure that we're taking care of this immensely valuable resource of water. So we'll take that information, we will go to the state, we will work with the different agencies to try to make it an easier process that we have enough people taking care of our water. I think Mayor Wu was at a water treatment. You guys just have a new grand opening for your water treatment plant. Incredibly exciting work. The water that comes out of that treatment plant is pristine. It is at a level that is to be looked at all across the state, all across the region, the nation. So in some states that are in even higher drought rates than we have, they have policies in place that says, what can you do with this water? That water comes out at a drinkable standard, but that usually gets released back into the overall system. Our cities have said, hey, we need to have a conversation about what can we do with this water? Are there ways that we can make better use of it and taking care of it when it is such a scarce resource? And so that's another piece that we're gonna go to the state and talk about how do we use the water well and wisely. So anytime that we're hearing from our cities that they have a need, it's our responsibility to take that information and continue to be a voice on behalf of not just Wichita, but all of those cities across the state.
I'll just say, in Kansas City, they're building a water park. And in Wichita, we're trying to save every little drop that falls to the ground, right? And that's all in the same state. And that's amazing when we try to talk about how we get people at the state legislature to understand, like we've already said, every city and part of Kansas is different, even though we're all one state. So we need everyone to understand, we need policies that understand that while it's great they can build water parks in Kansas City, we're trying to grow crops out in the other part of the state and there's no water, right? And that's a really tough thing to do to get people to understand those differences when they want to set government policies that just one size fits all. It's going to work for everybody, because that doesn't exist. So that's our biggest challenge when it comes to water, is making everyone understand the differences in in those cities and how it works. The other thing is I'll say, if you have never had anyone, and I know the city would be glad to send someone to your school, give you a presentation on how you get clean water, it is amazing. Until I got on the city council, I had no idea how complicated it was, how much work goes into it, how cool it is, the different processes they do, how gross some of that water goes from being in the first jar to when we can finally drink it in the last jar. It is amazing. So I suggest that anybody, classroom that wants it, reach out to the city and get that presentation, because it is a really cool process on how your water gets reused and cleaned and usable for showers and drinking and all that other stuff.
All right, next question. Does the league join with leagues in other Midwestern states to address issues at the national level that may be unique to the Midwest? And can you provide examples?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I mentioned this earlier. Wichita, actually no, sorry. I'm going to take a quick step back. The league, our organization, has been around since 1910, and the city of Wichita was the founding place, just right around this part of the mayor and the city clerk were two of the original people that helped make the league possible. So that happened right here in Wichita. There is also a national league of cities. That was also formed in Kansas. We helped bring the original 12 states together to form the national league that focuses on those issues that are at the federal level. So Kansas has been part of the national voice from the very beginning. One of the Kansas League's longtime directors, John Stutz, he also served at the federal level for the National League of Cities at the exact same time. So Kansas has had this very big voice at the federal level going back to its very beginning. In just a month from now, I'm going to go to the National League of Cities. They're going to celebrate their 100th anniversary. That's something that we got to do years ago because we're even older than them. And so we are regularly, I just had some more emails come in from my counterparts at the other states. We're talking about things that are happening. There was an announcement yesterday that relates to water and the pipes. So again, this water issue comes up. It happens at the federal level. We're going to take that information. We'll talk with the other states. We'll continue to have that voice with our legislators. There is so much that goes into helping us function as a society that just is easily taken for granted. But because it is so complex, we want to continue to look for good information to know how to do it well. And so, yeah, talking to other states, seeing what they're doing. If Wichita has a question about something, we can talk to one of our other similar states and say, hey, what are your cities doing? Is this something that we could be doing better? And so we're constantly looking to do it to the best of our ability.
I'll just say, I know you hear this a lot, and it's true, and I hope you take it seriously when your people in your life tell you it. Never be afraid to ask for help, ever, right? Because when you've reached that point, it means you think you're solving the problem, and you're probably really not, because other people have good answers, and other people have figured out some of this stuff. We're not all geniuses. I can't be an expert on everything. Nobody can. And what we've learned is by working with those other folks and other municipality leagues like ours in the Midwest states, you ask for help. Just go to them and say, I need help figuring out this problem. And sometimes they'll say the same thing, so do we. And then as you talk together and work through it, you're going to solve the problem. So it really is as simple as that. Never be afraid to ask for help, and that's what we do constantly. And we tell others, if you need help from us, just ask.
I gave a speech a year ago to some people who are leading at the local level, and one of the values that I was trying to encourage them to hold on to, and it's something that I hope, to Spencer's point, that you will hold on to. If I can find somebody who's curious, man, that's somebody that I want to have on my team. When you have questions, don't just let it be, I wonder what that is, and then move on. There's good information out there. There are people out there. And when you can connect and try to figure out what those answers are, your likelihood of having success is so much greater. So the best that you can hold on to curiosity about whatever it is that you end up doing with your lives, it leads to far more satisfaction and far more success.
All right, another question. Social media seems to be playing an ever-growing role in politics, especially in shaping people's opinions about elected officials and important issues. How have you seen this trend impact things on the municipal level, and are there any initiatives or efforts that your organization has been involved with directly relating to this?
Fun fact, not everything on the internet is true, right? But here's the challenge for you. How do you know that? I mean, honestly, how do you, as a citizen, as a student, I got kids, I got an 11-year-old. He'll come to me and say something, I saw this, where did you hear that? TikTok. Oh, that's not totally accurate, man. I get you, but it's not right, right? So how do you figure out what's fact from fiction, especially as it relates to things we do as a government? And so what I tell everybody is, just know where it's coming from, right? If it's more likely that you're reading something that came from a news source, it's probably a little more accurate than, some random person who just wrote it on the internet. But you can also check this stuff. Most of our cities, larger cities especially like Wichita, have really good websites. So you're like, if you want to be like, is that really accurate? Go to the source. Did Wichita really do that? It's okay to call your city council office and say, did you guys really do that? I saw this on the internet. That seems crazy. Is that really true? We'll tell you yes or no, right? So the big thing is, the way it's changed is, in some ways, the internet has been wonderful in terms of how it connects us to government, because it does give a whole new way for people who otherwise may never been heard from to communicate with elected officials. And that's wonderful. It also lets people who want to put random stuff out on the internet that's 100% not true, make things up, and then that makes it harder for us to do what we're trying to do as elected officials. So I just always say, ask the people you trust, and then see. I spent many years before I got into this as a journalist, right? And the old axiom was, even if your mother says she loves you, you still got to check, right? And how I would check, Mom, you love me? She's like, yeah, okay. You ask a few times. And that still holds true. It's okay to take that stuff at face value to a degree, but double check it if it sounds kind of strange. And that's the biggest thing that the internet has done, is just the amount of disinformation. And then that creates discord and arguments between us, when you really realize, once you talk face to face, you're like, wait, why am I mad? Well, that's not true, and that's not, we shouldn't even be mad at each other, but we read too much stuff on the internet. So that's all I tell you is, don't trust it all, just follow it up with the sources and the people you do trust, and see what they tell you, and then you can make an educated decision on your own.
How many people here have or use TikTok? Okay, large number of you. So I think it was just yesterday there was a lawsuit filed against TikTok alleging intentional efforts to addict you to TikTok, and relatedly having the known effect of spreading mental illness, bad body image, and things that will have a long-term negative effect. That's what the lawsuit alleges. That'll go through court, that will be the process, but that's what they're saying. Setting the lawsuit aside, there are lots and lots of studies that talk about how many negative effects there are of social media, particularly on youth that are within that age of like 14 to 18. Like, that's the sweet spot of having really bad effect on how you think about things. One of the pieces as it relates to government is that the system is set up for you to see information, to keep scrolling, and to just absorb little tiny pieces of information without having any deep, meaningful thought about it. So it's kind of like it plants just a little bitty seed in your mind that may end up growing into a really nasty weed later on. And we see that a lot with government. It's part of why local government at the city level can be so much better than what we see of the ugliness that ends up happening in DC. Because at the city level, you actually can know each other. To Spencer's point, next time there's a city council meeting, you can show right up here. You can have a voice, even at your age. And when you are with people together, side by side, it's really easy to see something on TikTok that makes you think, maybe I should be a little bit skeptical about Spencer. Might be true, might not. But if I get to talk to him face to face and have a relationship, you can work out so much more than you're able to do when you're at just, oh, I should be worried about that group. I should be hateful towards that group. Because you see these little snippets and you don't actually think about it. And so that's part of the antidote that local government offers, is that you actually get to be with people. You are, each of you I think in the room, you're Wichitans. You get to be part of the same community. And when you know people and you are plugged into that, it's the best antidote for having this idea of a city turn into the idea of a community. When you know people, when you're with people, there's so much more that we can accomplish together. And that's part of what I love working with cities to help be able to make that possible.
All right, we'll do one final question. So on the league's website, it mentions how it provides information and support for elected officials or community leaders, but not so much for the people who live in the represented municipalities. So how can the information provided be helpful for youth and for individuals and groups that it serves?
Yeah, partly it comes down to what is our focus. It is really easy to want to do everything. There are so many possibilities out there, so many ways that you can engage. What we try to focus on is what is our very core purpose, and let's do that well. So our primary purpose is to help cities, help the citizens. The whole idea, I was coming up with some ideas on this, and there's a longtime children's author, Munro Leaf. He wrote Ferdinand the Bull, little kid's story. But the author also did some books on civics and local government. And he made the comment that from the very beginning of people coming together, they knew they had to have some rules, some ideas of how are we going to get along with each other and have some expectations in place that, all right, you can do your thing, I'm going to do my thing, but we're going to get along and kind of function together. Our cities provide those rules, those guidances to help bring everybody together. So we're trying to help the cities do that well. We also have, from the citizen standpoint, some points of engagement. We want people who are well prepared to run for office. So our resources help those people know what are the expectations if you have been elected. I got to meet with Mayor Wu right before she started. We have all these pieces in place, like, all right, well, you win your election, now what? There is so much that you have to do, so we try to help people be in a good position to know, all right, here's kind of how these rules work and how they fit together. We have resources on the website that relate to youth education. So again, trying to help anybody who's in the student stage of life know, here's how some of the basics work. So we are looking for our eyes on the citizenry as a whole, but knowing that it's our cities that are providing that key piece and trying to help them to do it well.
Yeah, a couple quick things because I know we got to wrap it up. But it's hard being elected local official. It is stressful, and you get some crazy requests, and some people like you and some people not so much, and you got to sit through these very important and sometimes very serious and heavy, and knowing that decisions we make impact your life. That's a lot of pressure. But you know what? It's also a lot of fun, and it is very rewarding. And I've met more wonderful people in my community that I didn't even know were there since I've done it. And I also like the idea that by listening to those people, I can now have a voice in making those laws that impact your life and maybe doing something that improves your life. So there's only two things I want out of you folks as a general rule. One, I want you to run for office someday because we need good people in local office. And I know every one of you here is good people. So think about it. Good news is you don't have to decide tomorrow. You got some time. But think about it as you go through life about what it is and learn more about it and talk to your local elected and think to yourself, you know what? One day I could do that. And the second part, though, is if that's not your thing, that's fine. But I hope you've heard the stuff we've said today about how you can still be a really good, engaged citizen and then talk to those local people who are elected, and hold us accountable and engage with us on a regular basis and make sure we're hearing you. Even on the days where you stand up here and you're pretty sure, I don't think a single one of those was listening to me tonight. Guess what? We meet next week again, right? Don't give up. Sometimes stubbornness can be a problem, but sometimes it can be your best asset if you are so stubborn as to not giving up to making sure that your local government is hearing you. So we want you, even at this age, to think about, maybe I can do that someday, and if not, at least I can be an engaged citizen, because those are the kind of tools we're trying to give people at the league so they understand how to play one of those two roles. And that's a lot of the information that we put out there for folks to make sure that they're engaged in the process.
Yeah, one last point, and Spencer's spot on about running for office, but if that is not something of interest, I mentioned earlier, someday look at cities as a place to work, because there is so much that you can do on that front, as on the staff side of things, to help build community. But also, I was just on the City of Wichita's website a little while ago looking at all the commissions. These are not elected positions, but kind of like little clubs that focus on specific areas where you can have a voice that goes directly to the city council on something that's of interest to you. It's such a wide variety. So there are ways that even if it's not in the elected official, Spencer talked about losing that first race, there are still ways, even if you don't run, even if you don't win, that you can have your voice and have it matter. So keep looking for those ways to do it, because at the city level, you can do so much to make it happen.
That should not go overlooked. Us elected folks may get all the glory, but I promise you, all the people who work in the city are the ones who are the real heroes, who do all the work that we as elected people put on them. And so, yes, having really good city employees is actually way more better than even a few of us elected folks in there. So yes, please think about working for city government.
Do we have any questions from the people here?
Yeah. Yes. There is, it's just city to city, and I know every city talks about that, which is why I really think it's important to engage with your youth councils, because what they're going to do is they're going to talk to those councils and hear the voice and say, we're about to spend a lot of money to build something new in our city, right? Whether it's retail or entertainment or a new venue, and they need to hear from the youth who say, you can build that, none of us are going to go to it because that's a terrible idea, but if you would add this to it, we'll all have fun and we can entertain ourselves and it'll be great for all of us. So that's city to city. And then there's actually a lot of fun stuff across the state, and there's some pretty good websites you can go look to if you want to travel around. But that's why you got to be engaged to make sure that the money is being spent on things you're actually going to use and have fun with.
Any other questions?
Well, if not, oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a fantastic question, and you're absolutely right. So I mentioned earlier that Kansas is an agriculture state. So if you drive out west, you will see cows as far as the eye can see. You'll see a wide variety of crops, and they all need water. We heard from one of our cities in central Kansas. Again, still water shortage, but a different degree. They're in a better place than all the way out in western Kansas. They have a business that would like to double in size, but they need large amounts of water to make that happen. And so all of these different spots, Spencer mentioned that up towards northeast Kansas, close to the Kansas City side of things, water's just fine. And so what the state has been doing over this last year is having meetings, all sorts of people. Cities have been one of the very biggest participants in those meetings, and they sit and talk about, well, wait, what's Dodge City facing? What's Wichita facing? What's Johnson County facing? And how do we value each of those pieces? Because it all has to fit together. Talk about this idea of being symbiotic, where all these pieces have to fit together for it to work well. We can't ignore one. We can't ignore Dodge City for Wichita or for Johnson County. It all has to fit together. And so, again, that's part of what the league is trying to do, is to bring our communities together so we can hear each other and come up with solutions. Because we're always going to be better when we're doing it together. And that's always the goal.
Can we please give Nathan and Spencer a round of applause? Thank you to the both of you with the League of Kansas Municipalities. They are here in Wichita this weekend for the conference where cities from all across Kansas are coming to ours here in Wichita to learn more about how they can become better cities, how we can become better cities to serve all of you. So I hope that you learned a lot about the big picture of Kansas and the League of Kansas Municipalities. I have to ask, how many cities are in Kansas? 625, very good. There are 625 cities in our state, and Wichita is the largest city in the state of Kansas. And it is truly my honor to serve as the 103rd mayor alongside 6 council members. And we always invite you to come to our city council meetings. Our city council meetings are on Tuesdays at 9 a.m. So I know that you have school, but I have been in touch with some of your instructors and have always invited them to come out here so that you guys can see how a city council meeting is run. How many of you have been to a city council meeting? Raise your hand. Very few. So again, the invitation is open to all of you. City Hall is really created for the people of Wichita. And so the very first question that Nathan asked about all of you was, what is government? And I have a graphic for you to see all the things that our local government does. So you can see that graphic right there. These are all the services that the city of Wichita currently provides, except for trash services and ambulance emergency services. Ambulance and emergency services are over at Sedgwick County, which is also a local government, but they are for the county. Which county do we live in here? Sedgwick County, very good. So Sedgwick County also has their own body or government elected officials, and they are called commissioners. And those commissioners meet on Wednesdays at 9 a.m. And so I encourage you all to also attend their meetings at the Sedgwick County Commission. So I know that Nathan or even Spencer mentioned going to a school board meeting. And so for many of you, you know which school district we live in. Which school district do we live in? USD 259, very good. So USD 259 has their meetings on Mondays at 6 p.m. and it's in a different location. So again, those are 3 separate sets of local governments. One is school, one is Wichita, the other is county. But I wanted to focus your energy on this because, as you can see, we do a lot of things in the city of Wichita, and there are 3,000 people that are part of the city of Wichita government, and we are 7 elected officials who represent the community. And so our job is to make sure that these services are being met by the staff here at the city of Wichita, but we also have to prioritize. So priorities mean we have to focus a little bit more energy on some things versus others. So at the bottom right-hand corner, the pink or magenta box is the area where community has said it is high priority but low quality, which means we should be focusing more on improving. And so the top 3 things there are crime, streets, economic development, which means jobs. And so the 3 things, again, are crime prevention and reduction, street maintenance and repair, and the third is economic development, which is jobs. And so while we do take care of a lot of things, we also have to have priorities, because we are only able to provide all these services because we tax people. And people get taxed, and that's how there's money. And so that money then allows us to provide these services for everyone in the city of Wichita. So I'm really grateful that you guys all learned a little bit about our own local government, how local governments work, the state of Kansas. And I'm just really, again, hoping that you will connect. And one homework assignment that I have for all of you is find out where you live and who your council member is for that area. So find your address, and all you have to do is, when you go back to school, go to wichita.gov, and at the bottom, there will be an area, a link that says Find My Council Member. And I encourage you to find your council member, and I hope that you will email them and just say that you attended today's session about civic engagement and civic government and League of Kansas Municipalities, and what maybe you learned. And let me tell you, our council members would love to hear from all of you. And so again, I encourage you to find your council member at wichita.gov, and actually it's even easier, wichita.gov/city council, CITYCOUNCIL, wichita.gov/city council. Again, thank you to Nathan and Spencer for today's session, and I really appreciate all of you coming out here today and joining us online. Have a great day. Yeah, maybe get the mayors of the mayor's youth council to serve in some sort of, even Zoom.
Yeah, no, it's a good idea, as I was saying.
Yeah.
If I'm preaching, I should probably
Yeah, so
do
that,
it.
I love